Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Es un gusto muy grande para mí estar aquí en Chile, donde yo soy ingeniera civil y de transportes y como que muchos de mis ídolos están aquí en Chile, que exportan sabiduría en estos temas. Ahora voy a cambiar para inglés antes que sea tarde, ¿ok? Okay. So a little bit of data. We have big challenges, and I wanna mention a few here. More than 660 million people lack access to a clean source of drinking water in the world. Approximately 1 billion people worldwide live without access to electric power. About 1 billion people live without access to an all-weather road, restricting health, education, employment, and trade. And other problems that, one of them was cited by the Secretario de Vivienda, Guillermo Rolando, is que people have no access to their partners if they live too far away. So even my friends are saying that they are going to start working with Tinder now to do some geofencing. So, you can only find a partner that lives so far away from you. Otherwise, you can't date, right? So jokes apart, our challenges are enormous. This McKinsey report 2016 says that to close the infrastructure gap, we have to invest $3.3 trillion a year to close this infrastructure gap. 1.9 of this 3.3 is per year is required in developing countries, from which the middle-income countries and low-income countries spend only 1 trillion, and 80%, the vast majority, comes from the public sector. And this brings us to the big challenge of investing 10 trillion by 2030. And the World Bank is approaching this agenda and trying to support this, to bridge this gap through the MFD agenda. The Maximizing Finance for Development seeks to leverage the private sector and optimize the use of scarce public resources to finance development projects in a way that is fiscally, environmentally, and socially sustainable. And here are the 5 components of the World Bank Group. I think it's, I was wondering what I should talk about here, but I think it's always good to know that we are not just the World Bank people normally refer to. The first one is the World Bank. It's actually the IBRD. It's what we refer as the World Bank normally in countries. It's basically, it provides loans, guarantees, and technical assistance to middle income and low income country. Then we have the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, that provides debt and equity to private sector and advisory services to governments. We have MIGA that provides political risk insurance to projects and to the private sector in middle and low income countries. We have IDA that is similar to the World Bank that I said, the IBRD, but then to lower income countries. And we have the ICSID that does conciliation and arbitration of investment disputes between foreign investors and host countries. So basically what the World Bank does in the PPP business, and the World Bank Group now I'm referring to, is to try to mediate a little bit the conversation between private and public sector. The presentation from Marcelo Hernandez today touched on the main challenges we face and things that seem to be in a good shape here in Chile with more than 20 years of expertise, etc. We are really now at this moment trying to build a new generation of PPPs because we feel, especially the countries that have some kind of, 2 decades or more of experience in PPPs now must look very different than they did 20 years ago. We're learning, and I think that the new generation has a lot to improve. So basically, here we do upstream and technical and financial fiscal analysis. We support institutional and regulatory reforms more upstream. We then do this with the World Bank. Then we do structuring, implementation, investor marketing, transaction closing with IFC, and somewhat technical support from World Bank. We do financing and guarantees from MIGA, and also the World Bank has a guarantee product. And obviously all of that with the goals of environmental and social sustainable, reaching environmental and social sustainable projects, and most importantly, and as importantly, fiscally sustainable. So talking a little bit about the challenges we face, and again, this was discussed in the morning, but just to reinforce and open the discussion a little bit, even when private money does go to transport projects, in general, they go mostly to ports and airports. They typically claim most of the investment. As a result, there is a significant underinvestment in roads and urban transport systems to, of the infrastructures that are most widely used every day by everyone. In fact, the G20 estimates that roads account for more than half of the 15 trillion investment gap through 2040. Another number, but this is until 2040. The main constraints we face are, well, some of them at least. Revenues that are generated in these projects are generally in local currency, creating an immediate barrier to cross-border financing. In general, these projects are subject to high environmental and social risks. There are long preparation and implementation times that do not coincide necessarily with political terms. And there's lots of competition from other roads, especially in roads. Risks that are somewhat specific to roads, I mean, the ones on urban transport are pretty similar, but the names are different, but low share of the market and alternative routes. So lots of alternative competition modes, other roads that you can take if you don't take that one. This is more of a problem, obviously, of the middle-income countries. The whole issue of tariff setting and the political risks. So, tariff setting is generally done by the government. Private sector is afraid of that situation. There are uncertainty on traffic and passenger forecasts the subject is inherently difficult, but in general, there's some uncertainty on that. In urban transport, in general, the project, especially if we're talking about higher investments like rail, the upfront costs are very high, and there's low coverage of CapEx and OpEx throughout the project, and so there's a big difference into that there's economic viability but no financial viability. So this gap, who bridges it? Normally the government. High variability in contracts, and this is more on the bus sector. We see throughout Latin America, and in particular where my experience is, mostly a lot of variability, so there isn't a clear rule that everyone kind of, can just look at it and say, okay, I can do this. And there is market fragmentation in many cities in Latin America. Common to both of these problems are there are limited players with expertise for operations, and more so in the rail business, less so a little bit on the road business, even less on the bus business, but there is limited expertise as operators of this. There's often market capture, a big problem that can come from corruption, or not necessarily from corruption, but this is a problem for the private sector to feel that they are entering a market that is competitive and that is open and transparent. And some of the countries we work with, there's low technical expertise. So I think just citing a few of my colleagues, and that's it. I hope this opens a good discussion. Thank you.